Hey YouTube, in this video, we're gonna go over a sequence for hip mobility. If this is your first time here, maybe like the video and subscribe to see more in the future. So let's get started. We're gonna begin with the basic hip car in a quadruped position. So I'm gonna take my hands and knees to the floor and extend my hip, open it to the side, abduction, and then basically take the smallest step I can, put it down lightly. Then I'm gonna lift and take it back around, back into hip extension, adduction in the back, cross it. Take it around, big rotation, extension to abduction, small step. Notice that my knee and my foot are pretty much in line. And then in reverse, through extension, adduction. One more time, hip extension, small step, hip extension, adduction. Make sure that we do the other side. Hip extension, abduction, small step, right? The knee and the foot pretty much in line. In reverse, abduction to extension, adduction, cross it in the back a little bit. Big rotation through extension, abduction, small step, in reverse, coming back, hip extension, adduction in the front. One more time. Okay, let's begin to find a small lunge position. I'm going to come on a come into a hands and knees position. Taking my foot forward and then my hands in front of the foot and keeping the hands on the inside of the foot as well. This is going to allow me to have plenty of room to bend my knee and find ankle dorsiflexion. And then once I'm there, I can begin to lengthen the back leg. And this is me finding the basic lunge. Notice I'm pointing the toe on the back foot here. And the main focus is hip extension of the back hip. So while I am bending the knee and flexing my ankle dorsiflexion, that's okay. These are just more of staying at a steady range that's comfortable. I'm really trying to, or at least bring the attention, not really, but I'm bringing the attention to the hip extension. Then if I want to increase it, I'll tuck the toe and lift the knee, and this will create more. Now, if you don't have as much knee flexion and ankle dorsiflexion, say you're over here, you will have, you can't just come up and high in the hip. You don't want to decrease the hip extension. So you're going to want to then walk it back again to find a spot where you can still create the feeling in this back hip. So the knee flexion and the ankle dorsiflexion is relative. Okay, a few more seconds. You're just holding this position right now in hip extension. This is one of the biggest hip openers you can do. People talk about, I want to do a hip opener. Well, the lunge is a huge one when you're doing it correctly. Notice my knee starts to bend. I'll extend it again, get back into the hip. I don't want to compensate. Okay, from here, we're going to bend the knee, come onto the top of the thigh. If this is uncomfortable, I would urge you to pad up, put something underneath the knee to make it safe if you can't get onto the top of the thigh. If you're here and you're ready, let's begin to flex. Bend the knee, knee flexion, and then pointing the toe. At the same time, try to extend the hip again in the back. So your front hip is in flexion, but the back hip is actively, or let's say a combination of passive and active, trying to extend here. Flex the knee, point the toe. This is the opposite of folding pretty much, if you think about it. You're usually flexing your hip and extending the knee. Right now we're flexing the knee and extending the hip. And just keep this going, squeeze. And then without coming out of it, just kind of release a little bit. Allow the knee to open up. Prepare one more time, point the toe, flex the knee, open the hip. And just keep this going, squeeze. You might be flexing the knee and it's pulling you into hip flexion. It's kind of a mental game here. Many articulations at once. That's what creates a pose, position, whatever you want to call it. Okay, let's slowly come out of this. Let's do a light runner's lunge. Take the hands in line with the foot. And now we are on the opposite leg, but I did say that's the opposite of a fold. So right now, flex the hip, close it first. That's a lunge pretty much. Notice my hands are still on the inside. And then I'll extend the knee until I feel it. And I feel it right here. You don't have to go far. That's the problem with trying to achieve a pose, because it's not really relative all the time to what you're available. Articulation, range might be in the joint, where you're working. It's so much more complex. You are complex. All right, I'm not going to allow this to open up. So when I lean back, if the thigh and the rib or the belly open up, I've gotten too far. I should not be able to open hip flexion. First priority hip flexion, secondary knee extension, creating a feeling in here. Okay, let's come back, switching sides. Taking the other foot forward. Remember, starting out with the hands in front, bend the knee. Fine ankle dorsiflexion and knee flexion, wherever's comfortable. I have a decent amount, so my knee is pretty far forward. You could come back and be hanging out here. Wherever it is you're trying to find extension in the hip, we're going to make it a little tougher. Lift, open that hip, create tension here. You shouldn't feel tension in your front ankle, your front knee. This should be in your back hip. If your knee starts to bend, extend it. And just keep that going. All right, trying to find that hip opening. Keep checking into the knee. And then we're going to slowly take this down. Bend the knee. Point the toe. If you can't get onto the top of the thigh, pad it up in some way. When you're ready, pull heel to hip. So knee flexion and hip extension. Try to open up. So if you feel like you're pulling in, concentrate. Can you open the hip as you flex the knee? Which you just did the other one on that side, right? That runner's lunge, half Hanuman. We ended in the other side with that, which we're going to go to in a moment. Keep squeezing, keep it going. If you cramped out, awesome. You won a prize. What's that prize, you might be asking? More mobility in the future. Okay, relax. Try not to come out of it fully. You're just kind of releasing the knee slightly, and then let's come back into it. Point the toe, heel to hip, extend the hip. Knee flexion, hip extension. Keep this going. Turn it on, maybe 5 to 7 seconds. And then we'll slowly come out. Backwards, runner's lunge, hands come in line with the foot. Maybe that half Hanuman, you want to call it. Hip flexion first, then knee extension. So I can even start back in a lunge. You're automatically flexing your hip, and then I'm going to work into knee extension here. I'm not going to go too far. If I feel it moving into my back or my sacrum, no good. Okay, let's slowly come out of this. We're going to work on some hip flexion, more active. I want you to take your hands behind you. Find a position that's comfortable in your back. Pull one thigh to your belly or your rib cage. Pull the other one in and hold. This is active hip flexion right here. Closing the hip and then relax. So you might be cramping or finding some discomfort. If that's the case, try to breathe it out. Let's do it again one more time. Squeeze. That should go away if you do it again. Hold hip flexion. Just see if you can hold it together, belly to thigh. If you're out here and you're trying and you're like, it won't go together, that's okay. That's just showing you the end range of your current hip flexion. Okay, let this go, which is pretty interesting. Your hip is your biggest joint in your body, and a lot of us cannot control the full range of the hip. We just did a bunch of extension. For example, let's just stand up for a minute for something simple. What I usually do is I show people how much range they have by simply lifting the leg. Majority of people can only come up to here, but real hip flexion is going to be all the way here. I mean, there's a little spinal flexion too, but real hip flexion is going to go all the way up, right? It's not going to be here. It's going to be all the way up here, closing the joint completely. So to take this a little further, if you had it and you're okay in your back, you might lift your feet and your hands, balance on your sacrum, and just see if you can close it together. You can cross your ankles, work on closing, trying to touch shoulders and knees together. Feet to the floor, knees over ankles, then reverse table. Hip extension, the opposite direction. Same thing, you might feel like you're here and you're trying to go higher, but you can't. That's just showing you where your current hip extension and range is. And then eventually, with enough work, you'll have it back. Full hip extension. You can try to make it a little harder, lift one foot. This is loaded. Remember, if your hip is sagging and you can't lift it up, that's a sign of poor hip extension, or at least showing you, let's not say poor, showing you where your current hip extension really is in the body. This is like Pursvottanasana, that yoga pose, very difficult. You can point the toes. Only do this if you're familiar, please. Right here. And you can't do this pose without good hip extension. You just won't be able to lift your hips. Now we're going to take it down to the ground for a moment. So maybe reach forward to come down. Let's take Baddha Konasana, which is bound ankle. That's what it translates to. We call it butterfly often, but the translation is bound ankle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actively pull my legs apart. So I'm on the ground. I can let my head come down, and then I'm concentrating on abduction, pulling the limbs away from the center line. And I'm just going to keep doing this. I might feel tension on the outside. I might also feel tension on the inside, but I am trying to work more of these muscles to open, and what I'm not doing is using my hands to push. A few more seconds, and then I'm going to relax. Try not to come out of the position. So allow that lasting change to happen. Right? Allow your body to feel the work. Let's take your legs up to the air, extend the knees. 3 parts, knee extension. Try to open them as much as you can. Don't worry if your knees are bent like this. Just try. If you really can't do it, use a wall. Right? Extend the knees. ankle dorsiflexion, pull the toes to your face. So roughly hip to heel to the ceiling, toes to face, think of this circular type of energy. And then internal thigh rotation, thighs, knees, and toes all pointing inwards. And then you're gonna keep this going. All three, right? Keep checking in. Knee extension, ankle dorsiflexion with internal thigh rotation. Heel up, toe down, right? Hip to heel to the ceiling, toes towards the face. Keep the rotation going. Slowly back into bound angle. Pull the legs apart. Create that abduction. Don't use your hands. Keep this going. You should feel your glutes engaging, possibly lifting you up higher. I'm trying to show it. Let's slowly return. Legs to the sky, knees extend, ankle dorsiflexion, internal thigh rotation. So it's knee, toe, thigh, all turning in towards each other. Keep reaching the heels to the ceiling. Keep checking into the knees. Keep pulling the toes to the face. You can even take your arms over your head. Right? The hands are facing out, and then like you're raising the roof. Hands are reaching away. You can reach the head away. Hands and head away from the hips away from the heels. Keep all of this going. Knee extension, ankle dorsiflexion, internal thigh rotation, shoulder flexion, and then lengthening the neck, the low back, and the hips. Okay, back to Baddha Konasana, butterfly, last one. Pull this apart, create the tension, feel it in your legs, your glutes possibly. All right, relax here. Try not to come out of the pose. Try to relax the nervous system. This is what I call the yoga, is you take the body to those places and then you calm the nervous system once you're there. All right, try to get this lasting biological change. That's what we talk about in functional range systems. When you get the nervous system to a certain point and then you kind of stay with it to create change in the tissue. Okay, let's slowly come up. We're going to come into a frog position here. So you're going to take your leg long into something, well, let's come into hands and knees, and then you're going to take your leg long into something I like to call the melon scooper. And the reason I call it that is because I feel like it's scooping out, and we're scooping the hip. All right, your thigh is the tool. You're going to move forward and back, and you're creating this kind of tension by moving the femur, which is the biggest bone in your bone in your body, around in your hip capsule. So you're moving the femur around in the hip capsule. And if you find a spot that feels special, go slow. You're trying to reconnect with all the tissue. It's all individual. Blood flow. It's a synovial joint, which means it has to be moved pretty much to find, let's say, lubrication in the joint. Other side. All right, you're in gate pose basically. Not that we're doing that. And then we're going to move around. I'm everting my ankle, if I didn't say that on the other side. That's the pinky toe is lifted. And that's allowing me, because this one will be different. You could do both though. I find more when I do it this way. And I really find that rotation. And you can stay a little longer in a spot that you feel needs the work. All right, into frog. If you need to pad up underneath, say, your ankles, I would do that. If not, and you're okay, find a spot you can hang in. That's not too much. All right, once you're there, you're gonna find this opening of the legs. I'm just gonna micro adjust to find my spot. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift my feet so the ankle bones are actually in the floor. I'm gonna squeeze. And I'm pushing my ankle bones into the floor, pushing for, let's say, 5 seconds, create tension, feet are lifted. And then I'm gonna relax here. And what I might find is that gave me some room. That was what we call a PAL, progressive angular isometric loading of the joint. Lift the feet, squeeze. I'm using the progressive tissue to create an isometric to load the joint. It's on an angle. The angle is frog pose. That's my angle. Get it? Okay, relax. Let that go. You can move a little bit. You can do 3 if you want. Squeeze again. 2 tends to be good enough. All right, let's come out of that really slow. Feet together maybe, or whatever route you like to take to come out of a movement like that. Let's meet back into Baddha Konasana, bound angle, AKA butterfly. Let's do a couple patterns here. If this is not accessible to you, I would suggest maybe stopping from here and working with the other aspects of the video until you can achieve a comfortable butterfly position with your back being all right. We're gonna frame the thigh. I'm gonna reach far, so I'm gonna come on to the other thigh. I'm gonna flex, abduct, and then very slowly internally rotate into the 90-90. Once I'm there, I put the leg down. Then I'm gonna start again. I'm gonna lift the leg, abduct, and then I'm gonna come back up through abduction to flexion, external rotation as I return into the full position. Other side, reaching far, flexion, right, from external rotation, abduction, internally rotating, reaching behind me, coming into that 90-90. I can put the leg down, and then in reverse, I'm gonna reach, coming back up through abduction to flexion, and then external rotation. Back to where we started. Let's do one more. You can take one hand across the chest, making it a little harder. So the less I use the floor, technically the harder a position or movement would get. It's a relative statement. If you felt okay, you could try both. Go very slow. This is more advanced. Maybe you hover, coming back slowly. Other side, internal rotation. Maybe you hover here for a moment and then coming back. If you wanted to try one more and you had it in you, we can come into bear sit. And again, I would only be working on this if I felt I had a good range, but we can go slowly. At first, we can rotate on the heel, internal and external rotation. Just figuring out where it's okay. Like we're doing a mini assessment. All right, if we know we're comfortable with the 90-90 and we feel it's time, I could try lifting the heel this time, pivot on the toe mount. This will keep it nice and aligned. I could always come into the 90-90 on one side and then slowly, notice I'm using my hands, lift the heel, pivot out, back into bear sit. Lifting the heel, rotate the other way, internal rotation. Coming all the way into the 90-90 if I'd like, and then returning back. Lifting the heel, pivot on the front of the foot. And you can also make this more difficult trying to only use one hand, more like the kickstand arm. So I would switch now. But again, this is more advanced. The no-handed version, maybe taking your arms up, if that's available, slowly rotate one side and then bow the stretch as you come around. Maybe a little hip flexion, and then lifting the heel back through bear sit. I'm using the hands as a slight counterbalance, working the bow in the spine, the extension. Notice I'm pivoting on the toe mound. And we can call it there, or you can continue doing some more hip mobility on your own. My name is Jeff. This is Yoga Framework. I just want to thank you for joining us. I hope you got some good tips out of this video, and I look forward to seeing you soon.